Alrighty, so welcome everyone to this month's Impact Innovation Lab event, our last one for 2022. For those who don't know me, my name is Carissa and I'm the Innovation Coordinator here at Impact Innovation in Brisbane. I'd like to start things off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands we meet on today. For me here in Meanjin, it's the Turrbal and Yagara people. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I'd also like to acknowledge any First Nations people here with us today. So Impact Innovations Lab series is about bringing innovation managers together to dig into specific topics and learn from others in the field. At Impact Innovation, we're all about building a higher standard of innovation and commercialization practice and building professionalism in the field of innovation. And what better way to do this than to bring you all together in this forum here today? For those of you who don't know us, Impact Innovation is an end-to-end innovation and commercialization consultancy. We specialize in innovation and commercialization strategy and design through to implementation and deployment. We work with all industries and sectors across the Asia Pacific, and we help our clients take their best ideas and apply the best course of action. So today is all about innovation value, and to give us a brief overview of what we mean by that, I'll bring in our innovation strategist, Chris Stevenson. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Carissa, who's sitting right across from me here today. Hello, everybody. If you could mute, yep, thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to really quickly introduce what we mean by value. So everything that we do at Impact Innovation is underpinned by the ISO Innovation Management System standards. And so this is it's a world best practice view of innovation, and it's based on this concept of an innovation system. Carissa, can I have the next slide, please? Cool. So when we think of a system, it's about the interconnectedness, the interrelating parts, breaking down silos. It's about finding, the third other. It's about the whole rather than the part, and it's about relationships as opposed to isolation. So when you bring this all together in innovation, if I could have the next slide, please, Carissa, you get this lovely diagram. And what it's saying is the interrelated and interconnected parts are all working together to generate innovation value, which is what we're talking about today. If I can have the next slide, please. So value is gains from satisfying needs and expectations in relation to resources used. So that's coming straight from the standards, the ISO standards. So we mean things like revenue, savings, productivity, sustainability, customer satisfaction, empowerment of people, empowerment or engagement of your people as well, the experience, the learning, the insights that you get, and also trust. So I think it's really important just to set the scene with that. That's our topic for today. So I'll throw back over to Carissa, and we're going to start introducing our speakers.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I will introduce our speakers now. So we'll be asking some of your burning questions to our panel of guest speakers today. So thanks to everyone who submitted questions in the registration process. We'll try and get through as many of them as possible. But if you do have any that you want to send through as they come to you throughout the next hour, just send them through the Q&A function and we'll do our best to answer them. So let's bring in our panel now. Our first guest speaker today is Tamara Pararajashingham, and she's the General Manager, Impact and Innovation at Uniting New South Wales, ACT. So Tamara Pararajashingham is a proud Tamil Australian living and raising a family on sorry, I should have clarified the saying of this word, Wurundjeri country. As the General Manager of Impact and Innovation at Uniting, Tamara's role brings together the organization's creativity and evidence to deliver its bold ambitions for systemic change, often through partnerships. Tamara's foundations in commercial finance, human rights law, international development, and economics have led to a career focused on the design and evaluation of social innovations and deeply embedding lived experience to do so. So welcome, Tamara. Thanks for joining us. Awesome. So our second guest speaker today is Steve Atkinson, and he is the Principal Analyst Strategic Planning at Main Roads WA. Steve works in the strategy team at Main Roads to identify future trends, technologies, and business models. This also includes managing their innovation and research program. Steve has worked in a variety of roles for well-known Western Australia organisations like Main Roads, RAC, Water Corporation, and Curtin University. And so welcome, Steve. And our last guest speaker is Brian Ruddle. Brian is Impact Innovation's managing partner, having established the company back in 2006. He has a diverse background that includes establishment of innovation systems, development of commercialization strategy for new technologies, management of startup companies, and strategic planning for international development projects. Brian is the chair of the Innovation Standards Committee for Standards Australia and represents Australia in the development of the ISO Innovation Management Standards. And for those that didn't see it yesterday, Brian was recognised as a standards hero by Standards Australia as part of their centenary celebrations. He was recognised for his work on the development of the international standards. So congrats to you on that achievement and welcome, Brian. So to kick things off, I'm going to jump into some questions with our panel. So Tamara, I'm going to start with you. Firstly, let us know a little bit about Uniting New South Wales ACT and what innovation looks like in your organisation.
Thanks, Carissa. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the country on which I'm calling in from. I'm on Darug country. I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and honour the great history of innovation amongst our First Nations people who have cared for this land for a long, long time. I'm from Uniting and we are the service delivery and advocacy arm of the Uniting Church in New South Wales and the ACT. And that means that we deliver a really broad range of services, everything from early learning right through to aged care and almost everything in between, including disability, homelessness and housing services, children, youth and family services, you name it, we probably have had to do it or have had a go at doing it. And innovation, as you can probably imagine, when you're working with really vulnerable and disadvantaged people is at the heart of what we do every day. So our practitioners are innovating on the front line every day when they work with people. And we are innovating our practice, our service models and our approaches. The second part of what we do is systemic change work. So really using our levers for research, advocacy, and importantly, social innovation and partnership to shift the conditions that hold disadvantage in place in this country. So innovation is core to all of that. And we talk about coming up with new solutions for entrenched problems.
That's great. Thanks, Tamara. Another question for you. How do you track value and do you have a range of innovation KPIs?
Yeah, I think so we do. And it really comes down to how we define innovation in the first place. So we think about innovation across three different sort of buckets, and they really align quite nicely with the kind of value you guys described earlier today. But also what we think about is purpose. So the first of those is social innovation, where we're really trying to come up with a solution to a wicked problem in society and see that change or that solution picked up and scaled and tested and run beyond Uniting. So true social innovation. The second type of innovation we're talking about is service evolution, where we're improving a client or customer experience and their outcomes at the service level. And then finally, we talk about organizational enablement, where we're really trying to evolve our systems and our processes for our employees or our clients. And again, that's all about delivering some of those productivity values we talked about earlier. The one I'm really passionate about is social innovation, and the way we track value actually is in multiple ways. So first of all, our board has asked us to create some very specific metrics around social innovation, and we report quarterly on how we're going in terms of having developed and scaled social innovations, but more importantly, are we seeing these innovations being adopted or scaled beyond Uniting? For us, a metric is around government adoption and seeing government funding of those innovations and seeing those replicated beyond our boundaries. A second way is actually at the project level. And so a few years ago, we moved very specifically away from your standard sort of project governance. Is this project on time, in scope, on budget type assessments of its value, to really asking innovation leaders, what are you learning about the nature of the problem and the solution? Because for us, that's the value. When we're learning about the wicked problem, we're learning about what's happening and we're getting closer to a solution. What are we learning about the ecosystem? What are we learning about what works, and what is this program, is this service innovation delivering outcomes for our clients? And then finally, as an organization, we assess our innovation maturity annually, and we have developed an maturity rubric to do that. But I know that many other organizations have different approaches to us, but every year we track how we're going on that maturity.
Awesome. That's great, Tamara. Thank you so much. And this might follow on from what you were just saying, but how often do you evaluate your performance in terms of how you're generating value at Uniting?
Sure. I think, we're assessing ourselves every day because that is the pace of innovation, but formally at least quarterly.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you. We'll switch lanes over to Steve now. So Steve, first of all, tell us a little about innovation at Main Roads WA.
Thanks, Carissa. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation from the land which I speak at the moment. Acknowledge their leaders past, present and emerging, and any First Nations people on the call today. So Main Road is a state-based road agency, and we look after 19,000 kilometres of road network. So if you look at the left-hand side of the map of Australia, we sort of cover about a third of the landmass of the continent. So some of the challenges we have are things like multiple climate zones, which some of our colleagues on the East Coast have less of an issue with than we do. In terms of innovation at Main Roads, it's quite a complicated innovation environment. It's probably one that's slightly more complicated than I would like, in that we've made commitments to certain programs for specific reasons, or governments made specific commitments on our behalf to certain programs. So we have a number of programs which have a very specific purpose. So for example, we have one program which deals very much with the black stuff on the bridges. So, you know, what's on the road. So I look after the innovation and research program, and I'll talk about that particular program today, and that's the context. And I guess the difference for this program is that it's a catch-all program. So it's really looking at bottom-up innovation. So it's trying to encourage people in the business to identify problems and opportunities to solve. And one of the other key differentials that is a lot of the other programs that we have key deadlines. So if you miss the funding round for a particular innovation program, you might have to wait 18 months or 2 years. With our round, we actually run the program monthly, so anybody can actually apply for funding at any point. So if you have a great idea but just missed the funding round for an applicable program, we can help to step in. So essentially, the design of the program is supposed to be bottom up and allowing anybody in the organisation to access funding and get support to going through the innovation cycle.
That's awesome. Thanks, Steve. How would you define innovation value?
Yeah, so I guess I had to think about this in preparation for the meeting, and I think for me, there's probably 3 key areas. So as an innovation program manager, I guess there's the value that we provide the business. So in terms of innovation, quite a lot of people who come to us for support haven't done innovation before, haven't been involved in a formal process, or simply don't have an approach to take. So some of our people who come are very mature and come to us with an opportunity, come to us with a potential solution and an idea of how they'd like to participate. But some people have a problem or opportunity, but really no idea about what to do next. So things like assisting with scoping, assisting with finding the appropriate research partners, walking them through the cycle of internal procurement policies, legal reviews of contracts, all of the administration kind of side of setting up a project. So what we're trying to do is minimise the hassle of somebody doing innovation. So they should be able to concentrate on doing the innovation rather than the administration and the finding things from around that. In terms of a second level, I guess it's about the value for the individual projects. So we look at the value each individual project takes, and we look at some fairly standard metrics. And I think some of those were on the slide that Chris sort of introduced, but things like operational efficiency, the reduction in labour time, safety metrics. So anything you can sort of think of that might be an improvement in the business. And we have about probably 10 or a dozen sort of categories that we look at from those to sort of questions or topic areas to probe when we do a closeout report for any particular project. And then lastly, it's around the sort of culture, the innovation culture of the organisation. So we look at what difference are we making in terms of the overall culture for the organisation. So they're probably the three key areas that we look to.
Wonderful. Thanks, Steve. And last question, how do you track value, and do you have a range of innovation KPIs?
Yeah, so I guess for the innovation program itself, every project has a closeout report, and then we formally assess return on investment for every project. So we document both tangible and intangible benefits in the closeout report. We document the process and the assumptions by which we calculate the ROI. So anybody should be able to follow the thought process and where we've got numbers from, etc. That basically spits out a return on investment for that particular project. And one of the things we've been very careful to do is always report the program level ROI and the project KPIs together. So if we report if a project finalizes and finishes, and we report a project KPI, we will also report the program at the same time. What that helps us to do is deal with failure. So not by design, but more as an outcome, about a third of our projects would be deemed, I don't like to use the word failure, but people might use the word failure in terms of they probably don't receive any material benefit. And so we've tried something, it doesn't work. We try and test quickly and learn quickly and minimize the risk of doing things. So there is benefit in doing that, but there's really no ROI benefit to us. About a third of our projects probably have a marginal return on investment where we've tried something, it's kind of worked a little bit, but not to the extent that we thought. And then we get a benefit that way. So we report that. And about a third of our projects probably have a reasonably high return on investment because we've tried something new, it's worked quite well, it's a step change for the organisation, and then it delivers very good benefits for the organisation. So I guess from my perspective, we've never had an issue with projects that haven't delivered exactly what we thought they would at the start because we're reporting the program level, and the program level ROI is high because the third of the projects that really work. That really helps us to sort of to minimise resistance in the business to spending money on innovation and research. So we do that every time a project closes. So that's probably on average 10 to 12 times a year that a project closes. So roughly in the order of once a month, but it's really driven around project closure that we report that. And then in terms of the innovation culture, we measure that in a survey every 2 years. So we do a formal staff survey, offer a couple of prizes to incentivise response rates and drive the response rates higher, and then report on the innovation culture across the organisation by asking the same questions every couple of years about how we're going.
Yeah, wonderful. Brian, I'll bring you in now. It'd be great to hear your thoughts around what we've just heard. Oh, sorry. Hopefully you can
I just started talking and it wasn't on, so thanks for that. But look, first up, just thanks to Tamara and Steve for taking the time to join us today. And it's always great to hear how different organisations, how different innovation managers actually approach the measurement of value. Just picking up on a couple of things, I think it's amazing and awesome that, Tamara, that you guys sort of measure maturity as well. And it's not something that we see a lot of within innovation programs, but it is a thing, with innovation programs that when they start, they take time to get to a point where they're operating really effectively and efficiently and driving awesome value, and it always takes time. And not a lot of people recognize that time piece, and I suppose have the vision about where they want to get that, their programs to from a maturity scale. So hats off to you guys for doing that. And the point I'd like to pick up on, Steve, and maybe Steve, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember an early conversation we had around, because I know we've got a few people either on the call today or from that are going to be listening to the recording from government. And one of the big challenges is about that failed projects piece. And as I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I recall you sort of talking once about how when presenting some of those failed projects, that there was the value of the system that you had, or the process with proof of concept, so that, before the innovation program was set up, often these thought bubble ideas there'd be a business case pitched, and then the next minute there's $1 million that's committed to this concept. And so part of the value of the program is, isn't it great we only lost $50,000 or whatever it is in a proof of concept, because if we didn't have this process, we would have lost millions. Did I get that right? I may have sort of misheard when you sort of talked about it previously, but that's something that just always stuck in the back of my mind.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess from our perspective, one of the conversations we have, and it's probably the government agency thing about having reasonable budgets, especially for an agency like ours, is that a lot of engineering type people, and I'm in very much a danger of stereotyping here, but we go for the sort of the perfect solution or the really high-end solution straight away. So a lot of the conversation we have is what's the opportunity. So again, taking a first principles approach. So sometimes we get presented with a solution, and it's coming back to, okay, that's a solution. What's the problem? What's the solution set? And testing the solution set. So it might the problem might be verified, but what they thought of as a solution might not be the right solution. But again, looking at what's the weakest part about this proposal, and that sort of lean canvas or business model canvas type view of what's the weakest thing here, and how do we really cheaply and quickly test that? And then if it passes that test, then scale up and do something a little bit bigger. And if it passes that test, scale up and do something a little bit bigger, rather than jump straight to a fairly large project. So we've had a few people in my very early days with the program at Main Roads. We had somebody come to me who basically was really upset because they thought that this small scale trial was a failure. And I guess my view of that is it was testing something. And the trial was actually successful. The trial proved that it didn't work. So that whole concept of reframing failure around, actually it was a proof of concept, it was a trial. The thing that we tested didn't work and isn't right for our business, but by actually proving that, we reduced a lot of risk and a lot of expenditure. So it's around reframing, I think, some of those conversations around failure, and making sure that people understand that there is inherent value in proving something quickly and cheaply doesn't work, rather than spending much more time and effort and resources in going further down the path that we would otherwise maybe have gone down.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, thanks for that. So handing back to you, I know we've got a lot of other questions, Carissa, that have come through, but probably just before I hand back, also just coming back to uniting with social innovation and like a lot of those sort of the metrics and the adoption and scaling. That was a conversation that we had out of we had a leaders event where we sort of had some other innovation managers together talking specifically around value. And that scaling question was something, or a topic, that came up a lot. And we were talking about it a lot because it's one thing to prove something up. It's another thing to prove it up in a way that it can scale, particularly outside of your organization. And, because then you're sort of relying on others to be able to pick things up, which is doubly hard. So, just sort of a shout out to that one as well, because I think it's a really good way to look at the value of the innovation program, with a slightly different lens. So, Carissa, I'll hand back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So now I'm going to throw it over to our innovation strategist, Chris Stevenson again, who will ask some questions from the audience. So over to you, Chris.
Cool, thanks, Carissa. First question is from Michael B. And the question is, how are intangible benefits measured and communicated? So I think when we're talking intangible benefits, it might be things like empowerment of staff, or maybe some of the learning that, you know, maybe it's not strategic intelligence, but it's some of that kind of learning along the way. Things like building trust. Maybe Tamara, did you want to speak to that first around how you measure and communicate intangible value?
Sure, it's not an easy question, and I'll kick off by saying that I don't think we measure intangible benefits well enough, but we are really conscious of them. And I think at Uniting, we think about the impact we have on our employees, the clients, the people we support and serve, and the communities we support and serve as well. So I guess from an employee perspective, there's definitely those sort of engagement scores that are driven by good innovation culture, practice, capabilities. And we see employees feeling empowered, and they have new skill sets and feel valued and trusted by their organisation, and would hypothesize that the employee engagement scores are a way of tracking that intangible value. On the client and community front, I think we're talking about building new relationships and delivering outcomes, so better lives for our clients. And we track outcomes, so we track social outcomes at the individual client level. So that's one way that we sort of have a sense of how our innovations impact people's lives. But also the concept I'm really thinking about a lot lately is how innovation can drive social capital, how it can bring people together and can drive new connections and new relationships and new strengths within communities through innovation processes and outcomes.
Yeah. So to Brian's point before, when you're wanting to scale something like that out, it's quite difficult because you don't often know what's going on once you release something to the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes it, yes, all the more challenging. In a similar vein, we've had another question around how valuable is employee engagement in an organization's innovation program. And we work with some clients here at Impact Innovation who place really high value on employee engagement and using their innovation program to engage their staff in something that's, sometimes fun and, a bit of a rah-rah, and there's teamwork involved. And then that follows through to, collecting ideas, getting teams to work together on innovation projects and help deploy them. Maybe Steve, I know that this is something that you do track with the Bright Idea platform, but did you want to have a quick anything around employee engagement?
Yeah, so I guess my first comment would be, I think you really need to think about what the program is trying to achieve. And from my perspective, the innovation and research program at Main Roads isn't designed to drive employee engagement. That's a side benefit. So we haven't designed the program as a top-down program. It's very much a bottom-up program. I'm familiar with a Western Powers innovation program, a sister agency over here, and they've designed it completely other way around. So they have innovation spaces and they have innovation processes in which you get people out of their day-to-day job and into the innovation centre. And so I think it really depends firstly on what you're trying to drive. If engagement is something you're trying to drive, then obviously measuring that and thinking about that is really key. For us, I guess engagement at a sort of challenge level, we run challenges to find problems to solve and research opportunities. And I guess, we use Bright Ideas and we use the metrics by how many people are actually looking at the challenge. And we look at the back end of that to see, the spike between when we communicate something and our communication channels. We'll see spikes in activity on the platform. So we know that there's a correlation between us communicating with people and and people actually then engaging with the innovation activity. And I guess that's not surprising. It's fairly fundamental, but it's nice to see that sort of how you can measure how successful some of those engagement activities are. So things like, you know, for us to get putting something out on our internet or sending an email out is less successful than getting our senior leadership to talk to their teams on a face-to-face basis or in a team meeting. So it's actually starting to understand what are the more successful channels for us in the engagement space. So but I really think it comes down to what you're trying to achieve in terms of is employee engagement something you're really trying to drive. Then it would be, you know, you'd be designing your innovation program around that rather than just measuring it. Yep,
cool. Thank you. Tamara, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I think I'd concur with Steve. You know, purpose is probably the most important thing to think about. If innovation sits in your culture statement, then your innovation program might support that.
Yep.
I sort of came to the question in a slightly different way, and might offer, you know, my response to the alternative framing of it, which was, you know, how valuable is employee engagement in innovation, and you know, for us, you know, the most simplistic version of innovation is solving problems for our clients and the communities we serve. And we know that to do that, we have to be as close as possible to our clients and include them in that process. And therefore, our frontline staff are critical to innovation, and giving them the space and the time and the capabilities and the permission to innovate is pretty important. That's how I see that engagement really being so important to delivering innovation as an organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see many examples of, you know, here's the launch of an innovation program. We want everyone's ideas. They get lots of ideas and then they don't see the action. They don't see anything happen after that. And you start to see the eyes roll a little bit. I think, as you say, getting to your customer through your people is highly effective, and it does generate value. Awesome, thank you. We've got quite a few questions coming in. Steve, you mentioned Bright Idea, and Brian as well, feel free to jump in here. So we've had a question from Justin. What are the best software solution options for tracking this process? So I think when it comes to tracking activity that generates value, Steve, you are using Bright Idea. Did you want to quickly talk about how you're using it?
Yeah, I guess in terms of our innovation practices, what something like Bright Idea allows us to do is to launch challenges to specific parts of our business or all of our business, or even to externals if we choose to include them.
Yep.
So the benefit for me is transparency. So a number of our sister agencies don't have innovation software, and when they're trying to find an idea for some of the other innovation programs that I mentioned that are very specific, there's a danger that not everybody has the opportunity to participate. So I guess for me, transparency, having a software platform, is one of the key benefits, is that every organisation sees what goes onto the platform, sees the ideas, they see the reasons behind. We close every idea out, so ideas that aren't successful get a response. So it's that whole communication piece and engagement piece, and actually having transparent reasons why something was selected and something wasn't selected. That's critical. And I guess for us, one of the key ways that we've justified that internally as a business spend is that my suspicion is that I'd have to have an extra 0.4, 0.5 of an FTE to actually manage our innovation program if I didn't have that. If I didn't have software which has a back end that allows me to have all of the ideas in the pipeline. So things like scoring, ranking in challenges, running challenges. There's a whole simplification of the process that I would be undertaking if I didn't have that software. Yep. So I guess internally for the spend that we make, the justification is that I think I need extra bodies to actually be able to use that software. So I won't try and make a pitch for Bright Idea specifically. Obviously, we've been using it for over 5 years, so that tells you that we're relatively comfortable with it. But I think the benefit of innovation platforms to me is around the transparency, probably seeing that communication spike I talked about earlier, actually being able to tracking, when we communicate on the challenge and what actually comes back in and how that lifts engagement and response to the challenge. And also then just managing the back end and managing the whole pipeline, things like sending out automatic alerts to panel members who are evaluating ideas rather than us having to manually chase people up. Those sort of operational benefits and simplifications are really beneficial for us.
Yep, cool. Thank you. Brian, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just sort of make the point that, look, it really comes back down to the innovation program and what they're trying to achieve when it comes to software. So, yep, we're the Asia Pacific partner for Bright Idea, and there's a lot of very good reasons why we are their partner, and why we like the platform. But the key thing is with any, we've seen innovation programs run really well off Excel spreadsheets, but that's the stage of the maturity of their innovation programs and what they're trying to achieve. As it becomes a bit more complex, then, coming back to Steve's point, it's sort of weighing up the additional people to try to collect those insights and to manage the quantum of ideas and things like that through a process. That then becomes really important about efficiency and access, and again, all the things that Steve was talking about. And that's when it's valuable to start looking at the software tools that are available to help you to not only sort of manage the process, but then be able to collect the insights and the data, and feeding back into the topic, I suppose, of getting the metrics that you're after to demonstrate value and to drive value. So probably just sort of adding that again. This purpose of this forum isn't a plug for Bright Idea. It's one of the platforms out there, and it does help with that reporting piece in particular, and all those other things that Steve was talking about.
Cool, thank you, Brian. If anyone wants to know what we're talking about when it comes to Bright Idea, just you can flick us a message afterwards, and we can send through a link. The next question is, it's around uncertainty. So in innovation management, we often work with high levels of uncertainty. When the pressure is on to generate value, how do you navigate decision making to achieve value when you often need to rely on assumptions rather than fact? Who would like to take a stab at this one?
I'm happy to jump in.
Thanks, Tamara.
I think, I think Steve's actually already answered this in his description of the proof of concept type idea. I think it comes down to stage gating. I think uncertainty is sort of addressed or de-risked when you can create really clear stages and purposes for each stage of your innovation journey. And then criteria around each stage, what it takes to move from one to next. So for us, we think about our social innovations in 3 phases: incubate, optimize, and then scale. So in incubate, we prove a concept in one site, in one cohort, one community. And when we optimize, we replicate it to another site. And when we scale, we look at, scale beyond Uniting. And at each of those points, we have our own version of, testing whether it's viable, feasible, and desirable.
Cool, thank you. What's
Sorry, I might jump in as well. So,
yep.
And I think the other thing is around, we mentioned staff engagement, and I think for me that's also key when you're dealing with uncertainty. So one of the things we do for our projects is make sure the right stakeholders are engaged internally and externally, so we actually understand that everybody's across what the project might be or what the innovation might be. And make sure that the right people are actually owning it. So sometimes we have ideas that are lobbed from a different part of the business who have got a frustration, and they're trying to get a frustration addressed, but they're not the people who will own it and drive it. And so if the people who own it and drive it aren't interested, then you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, but there's a much lesser chance of having success. So I think given that you're dealing with uncertainty and innovation, it's actually making sure the right people in the room who've got the right knowledge base in the business to understand whether the opportunity is big enough. So one of the things I talk about a lot internally is about in a government agency that can be risk adverse at times, it's about not being afraid of risk, but making sure the risk is appropriate. So if it's high risk but high reward, then potentially there's still worthwhile doing a project and proceeding in uncertainty. But if it's obviously high risk, low reward, maybe not. So I guess it's those sort of concepts of making sure the right people are involved in the conversations to help deal with some of that uncertainty, and also making sure that you're your sort of risk profile is matching between the opportunity and the risks that you've got by taking the project on.
Yeah, yeah. And I know, and Brian, this might be good for you to chat about, but you often do talk about having the right people at the right stage and getting the right data at the right stage.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I suppose, look, the key thing, and Tamara talked about stage gate, or we were all talking about stage gates and things like that. Yeah, it comes back to what the purpose is of stage gates. The purpose is actually to reduce the number of initiatives over time. Yeah, it's not every child wins a prize sort of thing. We're not starting with 100 ideas and we're going to implement the 100 of ideas. Like, the purpose is to actually narrow it down in terms of what the potential for those initiatives to add value to the organization. And that's where the definition of value is really, really important. But then that is that whole thing of what information do we need to collect that aligns with that value, and having, as you're saying, the right people in at the right times to collect that information so that we can make this decision about, well, what is the 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever the number is of initiatives that we want to implement this particular year. Because the trap that we often see is that they're not enough. I suppose uncertainty about stopping initiatives is the bigger issue rather than taking them through. But organizations generally only have capacity to launch or to implement so many new initiatives every year. And so if you have too many, well, then you just generally don't have the resources and the internal wherewithal to be able to actually get them out the other end. So, I suppose there's sort of a slightly different view, but like, we see a lot of innovation programs with a whole heap of initiatives in the middle because they can't make the decisions about which ones to stop. Is the bigger challenge. Yep.
And of course that sucks resources, etc. Yes, Steve.
Yep. Yeah, and even within one proof of concept, we might have multiple milestones. So one of the things that we try and do for each project is actually define milestones. So the more money they ask me for, the more milestones I'm going to ask them to put into their project brief. And again, if something doesn't meet the first milestone requirements, then you kill it. And not, I've used a phrase before of zombie projects, because there's all these projects that everyone's afraid to kill, but keep hanging around the organization, but really nobody really wants them here anymore. So I think really being clear about milestones as well, thinking about milestones in your projects, and actually saying, well, if you can't meet those milestones, then this project doesn't proceed and we kill it. Not being afraid to make that decision is really key as well.
Yeah, and I'll add one other thing to that, and I know because I know a few people coming onto this this webinar from we're running a lot of research programs and things like that, and linking in with universities. So a lot of those are 2-3 year projects, and the problems with stopping those. And I suppose some of the conversations we're having at the moment is, how do you actually get research teams to self-report when a project should stop? And then how do you protect those research teams, or how do you repurpose those funds and what those projects are doing in a way to reward, if you like, stoppage of projects? Because this is where we're seeing a lot of those zombie projects occurring, is that there isn't actually an incentive to stop them, or there's risk to the proponents, if you like, for stopping the projects. And it's a challenging area, but we're sort of starting to come up with some interesting models and ways of actually being able to allow that stoppage to occur without causing other knock-on problems.
Yep. And one of those knock-on problems could be the impact on culture, especially if you're taking people's pride and joy off the shelf, and they get that email maybe from Steve via Bright Idea to say, thanks, your idea's being canned, but thanks for putting it in. Tamara, I might ask you, so I've have many years of experience in community services, and one thing about working in that sector is it's a really diverse workforce, and people are very emotionally involved in their work and in the lives of their clients, etc. How do you navigate the challenge of getting people's ideas, but perhaps not going through with them so that you can achieve the real value? Yeah,
it's a great question, Chris. And I think that relationship and the values that our employees hold is both it's a double-edged sword. So on one hand, it leaves them with incredible empathy and values around, collaboration and empowering others to be part of innovation. And on the other hand, as you say, people are deeply vested in the relationships that they have. I think the only thing we can do is be really transparent and upfront about what the innovation process looks like. I have a little image of a funnel, as Brian sort of described, and those stage gates being held there, and then involving people in making those assessments at each of the stages, and just being really upfront. I think one thing that people in the community services sector are very used to is being resource constrained. So if we come to it with thinking about it from a resources perspective, we have limited resources and there are only so many things we can continue to focus on. So we have to make decisions along the way. I think that sort of framing is something that resonates with a lot of people.
Yep. Great, thank you. And staying with you, Tamara, we've had a question. I'm not sure if you were typing a response, but would you care to share some of your KPIs or metrics that you use?
Yeah, so there's three in particular. The first one is that for each systems priority area, and I'll just explain what we mean by that, is as an organisation, we've identified about 4 systems issues that we would like to focus on over the next 10 years. And for each of them, the first KPI is that we've developed and proven a scalable social innovation. The second KPI is that these are cited by peak bodies, senior bureaucrats or MPs. And the third KPI is that others adopt our innovation or our policy positioning. And that can be government funding, government picks up and funds something, or they change a policy to allow for it to be funded. And there's a really, really great example that we're really quite proud of having achieved in the last couple of weeks, just in New South Wales a few weeks ago. And this is not by no means Uniting's achievement alone, but in New South Wales a few weeks ago, it was finally announced that the age that children will be exited from our child protection system was extended from 18 to 21. And that came off the back of a lot of advocacy work and research and all that. But there was a particular innovation that Uniting invested in called extended care, where we actually demonstrated what it would look like if you did extend care for young people. And we used the evaluation of that and the lessons learned from that and the proof and the stories to demonstrate the value of providing additional care for young people over 18. And as a result of that and a number of other partnerships, we're really excited to see that policy change, and government actually put $100 million into extending care. So
right, that's congratulations, and that's a great example of going to scale with something and really having that that systems innovation lens on it. Great stuff. We are very quickly running out of time. These always go so quickly. I might hand back to Carissa because we'll do some final reflections, etc. If you had a burning question, we could probably still come back to you after today. Yeah, we'll do that. Oh, you've had thanks for sharing, Tamara, on that one. So thank you. Carissa, I'm going to hand back over to you, but thanks everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So final thoughts, reflections, and advice from our panel today. I will start with you, Steve. Do you want to kick things off?
Yep, thanks. So look, for me, I guess the hints in my job title of being a strategy analyst, I think it all comes back to strategy. So if you're trying to measure value, go back to what you're trying to achieve with your innovation program, because that will help you decide what you really need to measure. So I think from my perspective, innovation programs that I've seen be successful start out with a specific aim, are designed around that aim, and then measure along that aim. The ones that I've seen be less successful are when organisations have sort of tried to cookie cutter another organisation's innovation program without thinking about what they're trying to achieve in that space. I guess my second last point would be also think about the role of the innovation manager. So in our setup, I don't actually judge the ideas. We have a panel. I chair the panel, but I don't vote. So what that allows me to do is when someone comes to talk to me about an idea, then I can be a champion for that idea. I can facilitate, I can help them mold the idea. I can try and really be an advocate for them without them feeling that like I'm judging the idea specifically. So I think that's another tactic that we've used. And then finally, I've learned through my career in innovation through talking to a number of people in a number of organisations who've been very happy to share. And so if there's anything that sparked interest today, if you touch base with the Impact Innovation team, I'm happy for them to pass on my details and have a follow-up session if anyone would like one.
That's great. Thanks, Steve. Yes, we'll definitely let you know if we get any emails about that. Heading over to you, Tamara, any final thoughts, reflections and advice?
Thank you. Gosh, I don't think I can be quite as profound as Steve just now, but I just wanted to thank everyone. Thank you all for having me. It's been such an enjoyable conversation. And whenever I have these discussions, I am always struck by how irrespective of, what industry or part of the economy or the community we work in, how some of these principles around innovation resonate no matter where you are. We just probably have slightly different framings and things, ways about working. So I think there's probably something that's quite valuable about this kind of conversation and being able to bring together diverse perspectives on innovation. So I think that's probably something we can all take away. But the other thing that sort of struck me while we were talking was how we value innovation and the question around KPIs is how do we link innovation value metrics to broader organizational goals and metrics and make sure there's a very, very clear link between your innovation KPIs and your broader organizational strategic goals and objectives. I think that's one of the things that's really driven change for Uniting in the last few years.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Awesome. And Brian, over to you. Final thoughts?
Yeah, I might just sort of continue on from that strategy theme that both Steve and Tamara have talked about, because I think that's actually where the longevity of innovation programs comes into play, is that if the innovation programs continue to make sure that they align with strategy, and if, as strategy changes, that the innovation program realigns with it, that's actually where the innovation programs maintain their purpose. Otherwise they become these rogue little innovation activities that, sort of seem to do a lot of fun things, but they can't actually deliver. Or at some point, boards and senior execs will say, well, why are we spending all of this time and effort and resources if there's no value coming out? And I think this comes back to where the value piece and the KPIs and understanding those and putting targets in place is really important. Just giving everyone a bit of a heads up what's happening. Chris sort of mentioned about the ISO innovation management standards. There's actually a measurement standard that's coming out. Hopefully it's going to be mid to late next year. So I sit on the international working group that's writing that standard. And so there's going to be, some really good information coming through about portfolio measurement and around sort of a whole range of different potential metrics to take into account. There's a lot of work, and there's a meeting on tonight to try to make it a lot more readable, because as you can appreciate, there's a whole heap of different ways you can pick up metrics and measure and things like that. But it's going to help a lot in terms of just getting ideas for different things that can be measured in a whole range of different areas. And so, just again, heads up, it's coming through, and it's a really interesting document.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Awesome. So as a token of our appreciation, Steve and Tamara, Impact Innovation is going to make a $100 donation to a charity of your choice. So who would you like to support today? Tamara, I'll start with you.
It's pretty hard to go past Uniting, but I'd love to point your generous donation towards the work we do in early learning to ensure that disadvantaged young children and families have access to early learning. We know that any child that can attend more than 2 days of early learning before they go to school has a much better trajectory of their social, emotional, educational well-being if they can do that. So I'd love to direct that donation to a project we're working on in that area.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much. And Steve?
Yeah, I lost a family member last year to heart disease, so a donation to Heart Research Australia would be fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. So just doing the final wrap up, we'll send through a survey to all of the participants after this. So please take a few minutes to fill it out so we can make these sessions the best they can be for all of you. The next lab event will take place in February next year. We're still planning that one, so keep an eye out for more details on that. And thank you again to both Tamara and Steve for offering up your time to come and share your insights with us today. It's been amazing to listen to the conversations. But thank you also to Brian and Chris, our wonderful IIG team, for your time as well. So that's it for today, everyone. We look forward to seeing you all at the next one. So have a great rest of your day and catch you all later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye.